Okay, so I made a video where I brought up the topics of marriage and Unix in regards to Zion. And um, in reflecting on that, it was made apparent to me that there were several things that I now need to bring into this conversation. I was trying to scope out a little snippet of many broader topics to try to impart as much value as possible um, in a concise way. And there's some lateral ideas that have to be brought in here. And I misspoke um, in at least one regard in that video because I said something like there will be single men and women in Zion. And after that, in the days subsequent to recording that, the Lord brought some things to my attention and brought into my memory many things that he's taught me before and added some new stuff too. So anyway, I've again tried to do a limited depth query into these topics to present to you extremely vital ideas. I think what you'll see, I didn't do a slideshow on this, I could have, but I figured this would be better for the purposes and the time that I have right now because this is not my principal focus this morning. So bear with me and try to explore this in your own thinking and apply it to your life. But some applications that should become obvious, I'll just seed the conversation here, is thinking about if you have daughters and sons and granddaughters and grandsons. These are things anyone in your life or you personally who is young enough that they're not married yet or old enough that they are, there are serious implications regarding Zion with these things. Many ideas have arisen. Um, boy, these topics are not easy to talk about. It's like walking through a minefield of false tradition, and I would rather not have my limbs blown off. So, my ideological limbs. Um, I don't want to offend people over things that aren't worth getting offended for. There's a time and a place for being offensive when it yields the greatest benefit, but this is something I'm trying very hard to be careful with how I speak about these things. But there are many topics regarding Zion that people have false traditions around, and those are barriers, those are hedges that prevent the Lord from teaching them more than what those people already know about these things. And they're so scared of certain ideas, certain topics. One of those is polygamy. I'm just going to bring it up out front. But also, people are scared about their current marriages, whether they will endure or not, and what comes after. And it's funny because people are more scared than they should be about certain things, and they're less scared than they should be about others. One thing that some people are less scared about than they should be is, and if it's not you, this is going to be shocking to hear, but I could point to people and show you people. There are numerous folks who are so ready to just abandon their families. It's sickening. It is sickening to me. So this is a very delicate topic. Anything that's particularly higher truth, it's wrought with complications because it's a knife's edge. And anything you say about it, it's like talking to the cops. Anything you say will be used against you. Teaching higher truth, wicked people are going to use it for wickedness. It's like giving them money. They're going to use it to advance their wickedness. And just as God has to cut the prosperity legs out from under wicked people, he also withholds truth from them. But we live in a very singular time where the purposes of the Lord do not allow for truth to be withheld any longer. And so it's blatantly put out in the open, and the people who are going to use that to harm themselves and others are going to do that no matter how much caution is taken. But anyway, so maybe that's enough of a preamble. I want to start with this idea of marrying and giving in marriage. So in this presentation, we're going to cover a set of mysteries, things that people don't understand, questions that they have formulated. We're going to answer questions that they've formulated around these mysteries. And it's a whole set of things that are really important, and I don't know that you'll hear them anywhere else, at least for now. But let's just go ahead and release these wild beasts into the wild. So, what does it mean, marrying and giving in marriage? It's a phrase that's used at least in two places. I've pulled up those references here. So in Matthew 24, the Lord is describing the conditions of the end times, and he says, but as the days of Noah were, so also the coming of the Son of Man shall be. I did not read that properly, I'm sorry. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took, I cannot read today, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. And I've included the rest of this passage on purpose. It's really important. Basically, let's just keep reading. Then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken, and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Who then is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath made ruler over his household, to give them meat in due season? Blessed is that servant, whom his Lord, when he cometh, shall find so doing. Verily I say unto you, that he shall make him ruler over all his goods. But, and if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord delayeth his coming, and shall begin to smite his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunken, the Lord of that servant shall come in a day when he looketh not for him, and in an hour that he is not aware of, and shall cut him asunder, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All right. So it's good to read these passages in these videos. It takes a little extra time, and we are contending against presumption of familiarity with their meaning. However, it's necessary to sort of harrow that up and turn it over as if it's hard soil so that we can grow some seeds in there. There are many ideas in this short passage, and many of them are relevant to what we need to talk about today. But the first is that when people read this, Matthew 24, I'm saying in general, the chapter, that chapter does not describe the Lord's second coming alone. It also describes the events to precede it. It's one thing that it's right before the part we quoted. Jesus says that no man knows the hour that he's coming. So he's giving signs in hopes that as these things occur, people wake the heck up and use them as evidence to consider changes that would otherwise cost too much to make. It's very important. The purpose of prophecy, one of the purposes of prophecy, is to persuade you to make changes you would not otherwise make by providing evidences for a future consequence that occur before that future consequence, when there's still time to change. It's like bringing things ahead, because the prophecy is never the direct result. The prophesied event is never the direct result of the cause and effect pair that he's trying to prepare you for. I don't know if I'm explaining this clearly. I'm trying. So when Jesus comes for reals in public, because there are multiple second comings actually, but the public one is the big one, and that's the one people think about. When that happens, time is up. It's done. Wherever you are, that's where you're going to be, spiritually speaking. Okay? That's the end. But, well, it's the end of the beginning at least. But it's the end of the current phase. But many things will happen before that where there's still time to change, so that when we get to that point, you'll be better off. That's the point. So, and all prophecy is like that. It's just the decision point. The decision point is in the future. We're trying to convince people to change in the present. And so we're bringing up, we're turning normal events into evidence for future consequences. That's what it is. Okay. So, that's some background on this. So why does he bring up the days of Noah? We're going to get to that, but I think we need to address this too. Will be in the field business. People read this and they're like, oh, that's the rapture. When Jesus comes, people will be taken up to meet him in heaven. Yes, it says that. Not here, but it says that. So this must refer to the same exact thing. Nope. Nope. Remember, there are many preceding things before that event, and the purpose is so people choose to be better than they are in preparation for the time when it's too late to do that. So this is describing a splitting of people. And it's not that angels will fly through the heavens and vacuum up people magically and transport them somewhere else, and their clothes will fall down to the ground, because apparently wherever they're going to be naked. I don't know, but that's in the movies. So, in these rapture movies. So, hopefully there are a lot of clothes in heaven. So, what this is describing, though, is a division, a great division, and that's described elsewhere. And it comes down to information. It's a sword of truth that divides. And that's a process, and it's really important, and a lot more will be said about it. And then he says this business about watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord doth come. I've alluded to this in other videos, and we mention it here again. Hopefully I'm going to mention it many, many, many more times. Every single moment is an opportunity for the Lord to divide you. He's separating the sheep and the goats. Funny story, the other day, a friend of my wife's, she has a daughter who has a goat, and she loved that goat, and that goat died, unfortunately, and got sick or something and died. And it was a sudden shock, and it really was hurtful for the daughter. And my wife's friend was like, yeah, we might get another one, but we really don't want a goat. I said, why don't you get a sheep? And she's like, can goats and sheep live together? And I said, not according to the scriptures. I guess that's a Rob joke. Anyway, so every moment is an opportunity to divide, and the Lord is dividing you. And that sounds like a bad thing, but division's not always bad. In fact, all good things include it. So a living cell, for example, it's always dividing. If it stops dividing, that's called death. They're one and the same. Isn't that funny? So the division is a good thing. In the Lord's division, what happens is, if you're on the correct side of the split, you get more added to you. If you're on the wrong side, you lose some of what you had. But if you're on the right side, you get more added to you. And the addition is always better than whatever whatever, I don't know how to say this grammatically. Weird. The thing that it's, whose place it's taken. The addition is always better than the thing whose place it's taking. Um, so division is a good thing as long as you're on the right side of the divide. And you need to watch always and be ready, because you don't know which moment is going to have an effect and the degree of that effect. This is why it's absolutely essential to always do your absolute best in all things, because to act as Jesus would in your place. Because you don't know if the kind of cereal you're going to choose to eat today is actually an eternal consequence, will have an eternal consequence. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but that is the degree to which you need to live your life. Because I'm not saying to live in full anxiety. It's not difficult to perceive what is best. To learn to do that is extremely simple. That's why it says in the Book of Mormon, it's as clear as the day from the dark night. To actually do it is difficult, but not to see it. To see it is easy, but in seeing what is best, there's no promise that you'll see by how much it's better. Okay? So hopefully much of what I'm saying here is just a reminder. These aren't the first times I've mentioned these ideas. They won't be the last time, but they're relevant. I have to go through it as part of due diligence here. So you have to always be watching, okay? And if you're not, it's very possible that that moment, that very moment, is going to be a junction to which you cannot return, a door through which you cannot return. There are many things. I'm going to make a large case for this, a full case for this at some point. I have it written, but I haven't published it. There are many, many things. They're listed all throughout the scriptures that have a time limit, and there are many things that can only be chosen once. There are some things that can only be chosen once, like for a woman who she marries the first time. And these are doors you cannot go through again. And this is why it's of vital importance for us to know what those things are and tell people how things are, so that they're warned, so that they have evidence before the consequence comes and they know what they're choosing. This is extraordinarily relevant to the topics that we're going to address here. Now we get back to the days of Noah, and you'll see why all those things tie in, hopefully. Okay, so there was a consequence coming, the flood, and they didn't know until the flood came and took them all away. Well, they didn't have warning? Oh, yes, they did. Well, yes, they did. If you read in Moses 8, there are 3 or 4 mentions or periods of time where Moses preached to the people and warned them to repent, and they didn't listen. Did I say Moses or Noah? It's in the book of Moses, but it is Noah. Noah went out 3 or 4 times and preached repentance. And times, I don't mean like, okay, it's Tuesday, I'm going to preach today. Periods of time, extended periods of time, where he went out and preached. And Noah was known by everyone. And there's so much more to his story than you'll get from a cursory reading of the scriptures. Maybe I'll get into it one day. What an amazing man. But the point that's relevant for right here and right now is everyone knew who this guy was, and everyone had reason to believe he knew exactly what he was talking about. Deep, deep reasons to believe. And I'll get into that at some other time. And so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. People will be warned. People will have deep, deep reasons to believe. You'll see these in time. You'll know these in time. And you'll see just how obvious it all is. Okay? It's amazing. The Lord knows exactly what he's doing. So, he's had all this planned since the beginning. And it's like a ticking clock. The gears are turning. It's all set up. So it's like. Have you ever seen one of those ridiculous domino setups? Like it's a whole field of dominoes basically, and then they click the first one off, and then the whole thing just goes. And sometimes they're colored and they have these intricate patterns. And it's this big piece of art, but you only see it as the dominoes fall. That's what this is like. And you see one or two dominoes falling right now, but you don't see the sequence, which doesn't really make sense in the analogy because you would see all of it, right? But just imagine some weird situation where you only, like there's some kind of a mask over the whole thing with holes punched out over individual dominoes. Like when I used to grade multiple choice tests, I took a hole punch and I'd take a solid sheet of paper and punch the correct answers on the score sheet, and then I just held it up to the multiple choice bubble thing, and I could see where the answers were right and wrong, and it was really fast to grade it. Imagine if you had something like that and you only saw one or two of the dominoes. That's where you are right now, and you might see one or two of them fall, but there's a pattern here, and it's all one giant piece of art. It's an intricate design, and it's all interconnected. And it's a chain, and it's all kicking off. It's not so simple as linear A, B, C, D, E. It's a network, but analogies only go so far, but hopefully that helps you understand it a little bit more. So, as the days of Noah were, so also the coming of the Son of Man. I cannot read the sentence correctly. I don't know why. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So, what was, if Jesus is giving us this eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage as a sign, we better understand what it means, because otherwise you're not going to recognize it when it happens. If someone were to say, oh, today you're going to meet a very important person, and you better watch out, because right after you meet this important person, a giant iron girder is going to swing and take your head off. So you need to duck when you see the very important person. You say, well, how should I recognize the very important person? Oh, I don't know. Who knows? Or here's 20 opinions from 20 different people about what this person might look like. So good luck. So it's quite important. And this is, like I said, it's mentioned in Moses 8:21 as well. So what does eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage mean? I'm just going to give it to you straight. It's not the subject of this video, so I won't dwell too much on this, but eating and drinking refers to the sacrament. Other religions call this different things, the Holy Supper. Okay, it's drinking the wine and eating the bread. And marrying and giving in marriage, well, that just means marrying and giving in marriage. So how are these connected? These things are regarded as signs that the people doing them are living in God's approval. The easiest way to break this down is to say these are religious people. These are religious people. Now it's interesting because we read in Genesis 9 and Moses 8 that the people of that time were so wicked that every single thing that they did was oriented towards evil, including eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage, which is great evidence that religious rites do not make you holy. There's something missing there that's essential, which is full consecration to God, dedication to his purposes. If your heart's not right, if he's not your number one in all things, and everything in your life isn't constructed within that, subordinate to him, then you're on the wrong side of that coin, even if you have the pretense of being on the right side. Now we're going to transition. So basically, when Noah went to warn these people, they said, how? Okay, so you're saying God thinks that we're wicked, and we're so wicked he's going to destroy us. Then tell me this. How is it that we are religious people? How could that be true if we're religious people? And so, we prosper, we have families, we have kids, our kids are strong. How could it be that God is unhappy with us? And I guess I wasn't planning on getting into it in this video, but it is relevant now to understanding their point of confusion, because the curse, so Noah's father said, finally we'll be free of this curse. When he was born, Noah was prophesied as a child of promise, a deliverer, because when Unix City was taken up, God cursed them. The remainder of people were cursed. Geez, we're really going down the rabbit hole here. So it turns out that the number and degree of holy people on the earth significantly impacts the well-being of everyone else there, right? So there's many stories in the scriptures where the last righteous person's booted out of a city and then it's destroyed. So Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, I guess they were taken out by God's messengers, but Book of Mormon, Alma and Amulek are thrown out, and then they kill all of the people that believe them, and then that city's destroyed in a day, right? So there are countless examples of this. Well, that happens on the scope of the world too, at the scope of the earth, the whole earth. So when the city of Enoch was taken, the only people left were wicked. And so guess what happened? A curse came. And it wasn't a punishment from God so much as the natural consequence of taking up everything that was preventing it, right? So if you pull out barriers that are holding back water and the water comes, is that a punishment for the things that are flooded? Well, no, it's just a consequence of taking the dam away. It's like that. So anyway, so these people were cursed, and they lived for a really long time. So they remembered when things were good, they knew when things were bad, and now they're living in times when it's good again. And there's sons and daughters all through this time, but there's a strong living memory. It'd be like today if there were tons of people around who remembered the Declaration of Independence being signed. It'd be really weird, right? So anyway, so Noah comes along, and through his life, he causes this curse to be lifted. Now, the details of this are not important, but they involve prosperity. And so you can grossly simplify this down to saying there was a famine and people didn't have enough to eat, and now they did. They had an abundance of things to eat. So, and Noah was the instrument of change. This is why everyone knew him. So, it's not quite the same in any regard, but maybe some distant analogy that would help is to think if Elon Musk became the most righteous person in the world and started preaching like crazy, and people are like, yeah, Elon, I'll take your internet, but I'm not interested. I'll buy your car, I'll take your internet, but keep your gospel to yourself. So these guys countered and said, yeah, but look, we're prosperous. We practice religion, and God blesses us with children, and they're strong. They're just like the ancients who we knew. And so they didn't listen to Noah. All right, now, what the heck does this have to do with Unix and marrying in Zion? Okay, here's the question. God says that priests have to make sure that unworthy people do not eat the bread and drink the wine. What happens if some random person just eats bread and drinks wine? Is that the Lord's Supper? Does it convey the same blessings? No, it does not. So, if random people marry and give in marriage, is that the same as whatever righteous marriage looks like? No, it's not even close. Well, what if they have kids? It doesn't matter. Well, what if their kids are mighty men of old, men of great renown? It doesn't matter. it's still miles away from the ideal thing, which it is correct to say the real thing. Okay, animals don't get married, but they do mate and they do have babies, and they can be strong, and to a degree they can prosper. But is animal mating the same thing as human marriage in God's under God's direction? So God's class of marriage? No, it's not even close, right? So there you go. All right, now with all of that, which took way longer than I thought, we're going to continue. Now, here is something that people are not going to like at all. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. I'm not sorry. I'm not going to apologize for the truth, but I am sorry for how hard it is for you to hear. I wish there was something I could do to make it easier for you to hear, because that's a price I would pay. Much has been said about Isaiah 4. One thing that you've heard me say is that one reason these ladies are going to have to beg the men to marry them is because in another part of Isaiah it describes how destitute all people will be, and not just financially or materially, but also in terms of the ability to cope with, contend with the challenges of life as they will be revealed in abundance in the end times. It's like a gradient with impulses. Or if you've watched any videos of tidal waves, it's not like in the movies where it's this mile-high wave. Those things can happen. But if you look at like the big tsunami in Fukushima, it's just a constant flood of water. It kind of looks like water coming out of a pipe, just there's no pipe. And then there are impulses in that, like little waves inside of that, which they're not little if you're the one that's in it, right? It's a really big deal, but it's not this mile high of water kind of thing. And so many things take on that property in the end times, and one of them is the challenges that come. And so fewer and fewer people, I made a video about this where I had some pictures of mountains and the water rising, and then the peaks are no longer high enough and you have to swim to the next peak. It's the same idea. So the challenges rise and the number of people who can contend with those diminishes. So not that the set of people diminish, but the, the number who are qualified to deal with that is smaller because the challenges are greater. So Isaiah 4 is a mystery to people. This comes back to what I started the video with, because their minds are closed to the realities that would make it easy to understand. So there are barriers in tradition that prevent your mind from going to the place it needs to solve that equation. But it's actually not that hard to solve. It just involves some ideas that people don't like. So one of those ideas is that men and women are different. And here's a new one that you might not know. What a man can receive and how he can receive it differs from what a woman can receive and how she can receive it. So it's true that neither the woman nor the man is without the other in the Lord, because as you climb the mountain of the Lord, not only does your perspective and character converge compared to the others at your level, as you go up, that becomes truer and truer, because you're growing in fidelity to the Lord. Your emulation of him is becoming more complete. Therefore, you're becoming more similar to all others who are doing the same to the same degree, right? You also will find and grow closer to a member of the opposite sex. And that culminates in the Lord's ideal marriage, which is not just any old marriage. It consists of a lot more than that. It's inseparable from both of them becoming more like the Lord as individuals. So, there are things that a woman can only receive through not just a husband, but a husband who is very righteous. Now, how does this differ from men? Well, a man can receive the greatest things he can receive from another man who does not need to be his father or his biological brother. So God has set things up so that men can transmit a fullness of light and truth as far as they have it, one to another. But that is not true of men and women. And it is not true of women and women. And that's just the way it is. So, another principle here that I'm just going to throw out, and I don't have time to jump into this and make a case for it right now. So take it for what it is, put it on your shelf. One can only come into the kingdom of God through one who is already there. And I apologize for just slapping you in the face with this, but the truth is this complex network, it's not a linear thing. And sometimes to address present needs, we have to pull on things that aren't fully established yet. But so put that on your shelf. It's a true principle, but I'm not going to prove it to you right now. So take it for what it's worth. One can only come into the kingdom of God through one who is already there. Okay. So with that series of blurted information chunks, I want to share with you a reflection of mine from Isaiah 34. And if you go and read these verses, you're going to find a bunch of gobbledygook that's really hard to get anything out of. But as of right now, this is my current understanding of the meaning of that passage. So these are verses 14 through 16, and I'm just going to read them. And I invite you to think about these things and take them as far as you can on your own. And the diversity of people will call to one another and assemble in like kinds. And among these assemblies, the night creature will find a place of rest. In that nest will deliverance be found. And from that nest will issue emissions of correction that rip apart what was previously undistinguished. And to that nest will be gathered, and in the shadow of that nest will rest be found. And only there will women find their worthy husband and friends. Search from the book of Jehovah and read. Not one of these women will lack a righteous mate, and not one of them will fail to fully adopt his purpose. For my mouth has commanded it, and they have been gathered by my spirit. So, there are many ideas here. And, the Lord has a language. People think that that means like a foreign language. It's a set of ideas. And as you become familiar with these ideas, there's the full magnitude of the idea itself, and then its little handle that you grab it by. And we do this all the time with language. If I say a car, you know what I'm talking about, and I don't have to explain to you from first principles what a car is. And we can also speak about it in generalities without distinguishing between specific makes and models or instances. Like you have the same make and model as me, but they're not the same car. They have differences. There's a little hole in the seat on mine, and yours rattles sometimes when you turn left, right? So the Lord's language, what you'll find is as you start understanding these ideas more completely, you see references to them everywhere. And one of the difficulties of Scripture is that you can't explain everything from scratch every single time you mention it, every idea. So there are cross-references all over the place. It's a self-referential volume. And God obviously does this himself. That's what the language is. He employs shortened, reductions of ideas, references to different ideas as he speaks things. So I was talking about this first verse the other day. I made a short video about logs coming together, and there were some charred up logs that I started a fire with a bunch of cardboard and paper, and it burned off really quickly and left the logs charred, but the logs weren't really burning on their own. But the second I pushed them together, the whole thing ignited, and the fire got going again. And it was roaring, in fact. It was very self-sustaining and successful. So the diversity of people will call to one another and assemble in like kinds, so self-similar groups. And among these assemblies, the night creature will find a place of rest. What is this night creature? Well, that's a deep topic. But for now, I guess we can say, think about the quality of the set of people that would justify all suffering in the world. That's a good way to think about it. And so Zion is a set of people that display the full magnitude of why God created the heavens and the earth and why we're here. And so as part of that, it has to justify, it has to be so good that it justifies all bad things that can happen. That's probably a sufficient way to think about it for now. But this place is this association. It's like a nest. It's a nest that provides protection. And it also is the base from which the gospel is preached to the world again. And as that sword of truth goes out, that is when the fulfillment of Matthew 24, of the pairs of people being separated, that's when that occurs. And in a very real way, it is the deployment of angels to gather the elect from the four corners of the world. How? Through information. Through information, through correction. And the people that respond to that, the people that are attracted to that and who live it, they are brought in. Okay, anyway, but the point is, only there will women find their worthy husband and friends. And not one of these women will lack a righteous mate. Why? Because it's not just if they don't have one, they can't go. It's that the way they need to live to be prepared for and draw into this set of ideas known as the fullness of the gospel, known as learning more about Jesus and living it, it will, so the very mechanism by which they're gathered, that is the Spirit, it will lead them to that kind of person and to seeing the value of that kind of person, and everything works out. So I can perceive that there will be a lot of people for whom there are gaps between what you're understanding with what I say and what I'm trying to say. So what I'm saying here is, if you were to enumerate all the barriers from that happening, these ladies will have a value structure such that their priorities will cause them to do what it takes to overcome those barriers and succeed. One instance of that is what we read in Isaiah 4. So they are under, if you peel apart that passage, you will see that these are ladies who understand the value of a righteous man versus whatever barriers might impede them from marrying one. and they do what it takes to make it happen. So that's not the only fulfillment of that. I think it's very obvious that the best way to do this is early. Early. So define them early so that it's not so that the cost isn't so high. So the cost isn't so high, and so that what can be gained remains the highest it can be. All right, now we get to transition to the role of marriage for men. And now I'm going to further develop this idea of Unix in Zion. Because what we're reading here is that there will not be single women in Zion. In its outskirts, different story, I don't know. I have a feeling that there will be tons and tons of women without husbands. I don't mean women who have never been married alone, but women without husbands that pour in as refugees to the outskirts of wherever this place ends up being in its final orientation. However, the inward core, because like heaven, Zion has layers. So, but at its core, those are going to be married people and their children. And single men. And the reason single men can be there is because a man can receive everything a human can receive from another human from a man. That he does not have to be biologically or legally related to. Okay. And I hope that principle is actually self-confirming. If you were to think about that in your own family, for example, so if let's say you're a father, you have a son, and you can think of everything you can impart to that son, and it's probably everything you could impart to another man, right? And then if you think about, well, it isn't probably, it is. Now, if you were to think about a random stranger who happened to be male, you could bring him into your home and treat him as a son and teach him everything you could teach him and give him everything you could give him as you could your own son, right? Not life, but you could give him eternal life as far as a man could, right? There's nothing stopping that. Now, when you think of your daughter, there will come a time where she becomes an adult and marries a man. And you cannot do for her what that man will do for her. Even though you can do everything leading up to that. To prepare her for that, you can't do what he will do for her. Right? So that's my point. And now what about an outside woman that's not your daughter and not your wife? You can't bring her into your home and impart everything that you could to your daughter, but even if you could, you couldn't do that to the extent that you can with your wife. Right? So hopefully that's obvious. Hopefully it's not contentious. It's not going to be popular, but it's not difficult to understand that one. Okay. And with women, I hope it's obvious that you do much more for your birthed children than you could ever do for anyone else. Anyway. Okay, so now let's talk about what the Lord said about marriage. And my point here up front is that he made it very clear that it's a higher road and it's not for everyone. Now, I guess I'll jump ahead here and read this one. So in D&C 49, we read that it's not good to forbid people to marry, to say that marriage is not ordained of God. So this is one of many, and we're going to come back to this, but for now, this is the preamble we need to hit. This is one of very many things that God said that people mischaracterize and use it as evidence for something he did not say. He never said it's good for all people to get married. And what I'm going to show you is he actually said the opposite. But he did say it's essential for some people to get married. And under the right circumstances, it's the only way they can do the greatest good that they can do. So we'll get to that in a minute because it's a segue to the next point. But let's go back to Matthew 19. The Pharisees also came unto him, tempting him, and saying unto him, Is it lawful for a man to put away or divorce his wife for every cause? So this was a trick, it was a trap, it was an obvious trap, but the Pharisees knew that there were many of them who treasured their ability to divorce their wives under any circumstances. And they loved this because it kept their wives subservient to them, because in those days, if you were divorced, it was kind of an end-of-life event for a woman, not just socially, but temporally. And in terms of being able to afford to survive. And they treasured this, and they used it to manipulate their wives, and they also exercised it to fulfill their lusts, because they could marry people that they just wanted to get married to. And it was sort of a, you want to have sex with somebody, all you have to do is marry them, and then it's okay in the eyes of God, and then you can divorce them if you get tired of them. That was their mindset. Which incidentally, that was similar in the days of Noah, and it's similar today. And people, up until recently, I mean, I think this spiked in the late 90s, and then people just stopped caring about getting married altogether, so they let go of even the pretense of doing things that are right in the eyes of God. But people would get married saying, well, if I get sick of having sex with this person, I can just divorce them. And that's what they did. Right? Basically, if it wasn't worth it anymore, they'd just divorce their spouse and move on and pretend like it never happened, and pretend the whole time that God was okay with that. So here's Jesus' response. He said, Have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And he said, For this cause shall a man leave father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they twain shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more twain, but one flesh. And I'm going to pause. Well, we'll continue. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder. And I'm going to pause here. There's a lot of negative sentiment that arises when people preach against divorce, and I think one thing that's not often discussed is marriage creates something that cannot be taken away. It's a one-way street. And in my opinion, that's one of the biggest challenges in addressing divorce that no one wants to address, is that after that, again, this is one of those doors that can't be entered into again. And this is particularly true for women. And so you can't undo things that are done. And I've talked about this before, but I think there's a video called something like male financial success or something like that, male money and female virginity, something like that. Anyway, female virginity is not a physical quality. It's something that's obviously tied to that, but it's the physical evidence for a spiritual situation. And you can't undo the bond that comes through matrimony. There's a part of it that endures forever, and it means something different for men and women. It's overlapping, but not the same. And that's really, really important, and it's what is at the basis of the idea that after a woman's divorce, she can't get married again. If she were to, it would not be the same thing anyway. So I enough about that. But my point here is that we do the same thing today in terms of marrying and giving in marriage. We're in a worse case than that, even because we've surpassed even the color of using marriage to claim that we're doing what's right in God's eyes when we're actually pursuing the lust of the flesh. We don't even bother with the pretense anymore. And it's okay, because as long as there's a pill to make the physical evidence go away, the physical consequence go away, we pretend like that's the only consequence there is. And this is obviously very foolish, but let's continue. So his disciples responded. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay, so I think we were in verse 8. Oh, no, we're in 7. So the Pharisees responded to his idea that once you're married, there's something there that can't be taken away. And they respond to this by saying, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? In other words, well, Moses said we could. Why did he say that? And by the way, Moses did not give a blank check to men to divorce their wives for any reason, and that was the question. So even the Pharisees did this thing I mentioned before of using quotes from God to justify things that God did not mean. Verse 8, he saith unto them, Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and shall marry another, committeth adultery. And whoso marrieth her which is put away, doth commit adultery. So if you marry a woman who's been married before, you're committing adultery. And if you divorce your wife for any reason other than fornication and marry another person, you're committing adultery. So that's literally what Jesus said. There's something I wanted to say about verse 8. Sorry, I should have said it when it came. It's gone now. Verse 10, his disciples said to him, if the case of man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry. In other words, they're saying, if when you agree to marry someone as a man, when you agree to marry a woman, if you're really pinned to her under all conditions except if she commits fornication, then it's not worth getting married. Because his disciples were wise enough, as all wise men should be, to understand that this is not a balanced commitment. It is not a fair exchange. It was never designed to be. He said unto them, all men cannot receive this saying, save they to whom it is given. Now, what did he mean by that? Was he referring to what he was about to say, or what he had already said? Or was he referring to what the disciples said? A better rendering of this would be, marriage is not for all men, only those for whom it would benefit. And then he goes on to say, for there are some eunuchs which were so born from their mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men. And there be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. Now, there's this apocryphal text called the Colbrin, and there's some gems in there. Here's one. Purportedly, Jesus said, marriage is not the least of life's crosses, and any who enter it thinking otherwise fall beneath the unexpected burden. If your wife is chosen wisely, you will possess a treasure beyond price. But if foolishly, you are condemned to a burden of sorrow. Now, whether he said this or not, it is true, and therefore it is valuable. But it's more complicated than just choosing a wife who's quote unquote good enough. That's not just what the decision is about. Whether marriage is beneficial for a man is an equation that includes various factors. One is his quality. That's the first and most important thing. Two is his desire. And, well, let me go through these. So one is his quality. If a man cannot support a wife and children, he should not get married. Going further than that, if a man is not such that he represents what is better to the woman who marries him, he should not marry that woman. However she feels in the moment, she will regret marrying him. And he will probably regret marrying her because of that. So that's the quality of the man. And second, the second variable is who he chooses. And I just mentioned one qualification for that. A man is trying to maximize what his wife receives when he chooses which woman to marry. And so he's looking for someone who values what he has to give the most, more than other women. Another variable that matters in this is what the man desires. No, I'm not talking about his physical desires per se. What I'm referring to with this is whether his attitude is what he gets or what he gives. It's better to give than it is to receive, but not all people have that preference. In fact, it's extraordinarily rare. I would say if a man does not seek marriage uniquely for what opportunities it affords for him to sacrifice himself for the benefit of another person in ways he couldn't without it, then he should not get married. So here you have two things, quality and desire, that determine whether a man should get married at all or not. And the third thing, which is the quality of the woman, that determines which woman he should marry if those two conditions are true. If those two conditions are false, or he cannot find a woman interested in him who is of sufficient quality to match what would be beneficial between them, then he shouldn't get married. It's quite simple. It's quite simple. Now, yeah, maybe that's good. Okay? So that would be making yourself a eunuch for the kingdom of heaven's sake, at least ideologically, not physically per se. Now let's get to the physical part of this. Well, okay, this just backs up what we just talked about with those three qualifications. And I have to give you another mystery here to really drive this home. So the idea of marriage is that the earth might answer the end of its creation. That's why it's not good to forbid to marry. God knows full well. So he's, first off, citing the fact that people get married and have kids as evidence of God's approval is the dumbest thing you could ever do, or among the dumbest things you could ever do. Because he has given blanket authority to mankind to choose to get married and obviously to have kids. That's the having kids part is a physical thing. Yes, there are fertility complications sometimes, but by and large, this is something that happens like clockwork. A plus B equals C. Okay? As far as having babies, it's pretty simple. Now, actually getting married, that's something two people agree to do, right? This is not, it's funny, people go through such a rigmarole to involve some sort of religious official. What is that dude doing? If he doesn't have the authority to say you two should not get married and you would not listen to that, then he has no input that's valid in any way in saying you are married. That's if you trust that person to be a representative of God to such an extent that you would listen to him if he said this is not the one for you, move on. Like you come to say, hey, we're ready to get married. I've known this person for a year. We're in love, whatever. And he says, no, this isn't the one for you. Move on. and you're like, hey, forget you, I'll get another guy to marry me, then guess what? Whatever you're getting out of him is zero. There's nothing there. So that's a good test for that. Okay? So if that's the case anyway, right? Or if God honors any kind of civil union, if you can go before a judge and that counts as marriage in God's eyes according to you, then there's no point in even doing that. You can make an agreement, one person to another, and God has already given blanket authority for that in this world. If you want something higher, then find something that's actually higher, but don't pretend that the same lower thing is different. There's no evidence for that, and there's sufficient contrary evidence against it. Okay, so there's that. Okay, so one reason he's made that bar so low is because having kids furthers his purposes. So there needs to be procreation for the world to continue. And if the only people that ever got married here were the ones that were going to be married hereafter, everything would come to a grinding stop way before now. Everything would have ended a long time ago. Okay? Exactly when is up for debate, but it might be a lot sooner than you thought. A lot earlier than you thought. So what's this business that it might be filled with the measure of man? Well, since we're on this topic, it's always good to come back and poke this. I had a conversation with some people once that illustrated an attitude that a whole lot of people have. And when they read be fruitful and multiply in Genesis, which was said to Adam and Eve, to Noah, and his sons, and to others, they read that and think, oh, God wants us to have as many kids as we physically can because that's his purpose, that fulfills his purpose. And irrespective of how much money we have or the living conditions we're under or the safety of those kids, we should do it anyway, because if we're able to physically have them, then obviously it's his will that we do. There are many, many people who believe this in this world. Not a majority, of course, but a lot of people, a lot of religious people believe this. And it's utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense. Okay? That Hebrew phrase, be fruitful and multiply, it doesn't mean have as many kids as you possibly can and fill up the space in the earth. The earth's space is already full. I'm not a Malthusian, but if you look at the arable land in the world and you take out fossil fuels, the earth cannot support the current population. It's just not possible on subsistence farming. So the earth is already full. The earth's purposes are not fulfilled. This is very different. So why do you think God told Adam and Eve, Noah, and Abraham to have kids? It's because they knew what was up. They were righteous. And the best thing super righteous people can do is have kids. Because there's no contribution you can make in this world that exceeds the built-in advantage you have in the parent-child relationship to teach truth. That is the most fruitful environment there is for teaching truth. Because the people get to know you so well that they cannot deny the evidence they have to believe that whatever you say is true, as far as you know. That's why it's valuable. And it's something that's wasted, for the most part, in this world. Including amongst these people that breed like rabbits. Now, this being said, I have 5 kids and I wish I had more. I wish I had more. But, so there's nothing wrong with breeding like rabbits if you're doing it for the right purposes, which is to help accomplish the purpose of the earth, to improve all things. Okay? That's what it means to be fruitful and multiply. It's not about your physical progeny. It's about the Lord's purpose. If physical posterity assists in that, then it's part of that. And so is building a wooden chair or pruning a fruit tree. You see? It's not so simple as, all right, baby mode activated. All right. Now we'll end with this. This is, oh, I didn't cite it. I'm sorry. This is Isaiah. Sorry, I need to look this up. I think it's 30. Oh, it's 56. Sorry, this is Isaiah 56. Okay, so here's a passage that talks about Unix in Zion. And we do not have an equivalent passage for women, for adult single women in Zion. Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Neither let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, the Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree, because they can't have kids. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant. Even unto them will I give in mine house, and within my walls a place and a name, better than of sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, every one that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant. So these relationships are created from men to men, even when those receiving men cannot have children and are not married. Okay? I left out a scripture here, unfortunately. And it's important, so please bear with me. Shoot, what's the best way to find it? I really thought I put this in, but I didn't. So let's look it up. Which one do I want here? Let's go with Matthew 5. So Jesus mentions this several times, but there's this idea that it's better to cut off what deviates from God and enter into life maimed than it is to go to hell whole. So one example is from Matthew 5:29 and 30. I'll just paste this below. So he says, if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. What is this? Oh, there was more. There it is. I'm sorry. What is going on here? Okay, I had more of Isaiah 56. Sorry. Technical difficulties. I didn't realize there was another page here. Okay. Well, back it up. Going back to Isaiah 56, so we left off, everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it and taketh hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar. For mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people. The Lord God, which gathereth the outcast of Israel, saith, yet will I gather others to him, beside those that are gathered unto him. And that's a model not just of the eventual latter day Jerusalem, attracting to it people from the whole world. But um, and that's after the Lord visits. Well, it happens before as well, but I won't get into that. So, but well, just to put it briefly, so the Jews come to Jerusalem, and the Lord comes after that, and I'm leaving out a whole bunch of other things, and then the world comes to Jerusalem. So it's not just referring to that, but this is a pattern that applies to different scopes. It happens. I've just described this as water droplets. How they, on a glass pane, they'll suck into each other, and it's in unpredictable ways, right? It's kind of chaotic, and that's how these groups of self-similar people will join up with one another, and they'll gather others to them besides those that are already gathered to them. So anyway, so back to this Matthew 5 verse here. And if thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. And if thy right hand offend thee, cut it off and cast it from thee, for it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. Okay, so when people discuss this passage, they say, well, this is figurative. God doesn't want you to pluck out your right eye or cut off your hand. If you're a drunk, if you're an alcoholic, you might find success in refusing to ever go to any place that serves alcohol. Many have. Is that not a literal application of this? Now, in that case, isn't it better to become strong enough in the Lord that you're not tempted by those things even when they're offered to you? Yes, absolutely it is. But if you're not willing to do that, then the next best thing you could do is say, I will never go into a bar again. I will never go to a restaurant that serves alcohol. I won't go to parties where there's alcohol, etc. Right? Well, and by the way, it's even better to get to the point where you can use alcohol always for the greatest benefit. That's the maximal blessing. There's 3 tiers. For the greatest benefit, or you've decided that you don't want to do that, you're not willing to do that, so it's better to just abstain from it completely. Okay, cool. Or you don't even want to go there in the first place. Fine, you're tier 2. It's a good place to be. Tier 3 is, I will not go around it at all because I will fall into that temptation. Well, the whole reason we're on this earth is to be subjected to temptation so that we can conquer it. But it is better to make the choice to withdraw from those situations than it is to sin by partaking of them in ways that the Lord would not approve, that he wouldn't do in your place. Yeah, Jesus drank, got in trouble for it with the Pharisees. John didn't, and they criticized him for that. Jesus did, they criticized him for that. How does this apply to sexual temptation? Well, I submit that there's a very literal application. There are likewise 3 tiers. The first tier is to use it for what it's meant for. The second tier is to abstain completely because you're not willing to use it for what it's meant for. And this one has a slight modification because there are people who have no business, there are men who have no business getting married. So what's tier 3? The Lord said it right here. Right here. There be eunuchs which have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. Matthew 19:12. That's what it is. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. All right, we will end it there.